Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSC Squared podcast. Welcome, everybody, to episode 293 of the PBSC podcast. Steve Moore and Mark Castleman here. We've got a interesting two-part episode coming for you today. So this is,
and I think it's been years.
it might have been. We were talking about that before when the last time was we did a multi-part episode, and today, yeah, it's been a while for sure. So this is episode 293, and next week will be episode 294. And so we have broken this down into a two-part series. So be sure to tune in next week if you're hearing this when it first releases for the second half. For that episode, we're actually going to just I know we've never done this before. It was a longer submission, but we're going to go ahead and just read the first little piece of that submission, the part that pertains to today. As you can see, the title of today's episode is "The Impact of a Sexually Abusive Childhood on a Betrayed Partner."
Yes.
Something that we talk about in here in passing a lot, but not something, Mark, that I think we've really tackled, especially on the partner side of things.
I don't know that we have.
Ever. Have we?
I can't remember.
I don't know that we have. So, yeah, pretty exciting. It's going to be a good thing. We're excited to be here with you. And so strap in. It's going to be a good one. So here we go. Here's the first part of the submission. This does come up from a betrayed partner. Firstly, thank you for all you do. You are most welcome to who submitted this. We appreciate the submission. It's a great submission. Truly, I've never felt so seen or heard in my entire life until I found your podcast. Again, thank you. Sorry, I should have said that after. I was introduced to pornography. Now, keep in mind, this is a partner, okay, partner of an act. I was introduced to pornography at the age of 10 by an older male family member. Now, she doesn't say more than that, just a family member who would use me and pornography for his sexual releases. Ultimately, this was very traumatizing for me and affected who I am as a person today. I have always had a strong issue with pornography and sexually related issues throughout the course of my entire life. Now, that's where we chose to pause it, because then she kind of goes into the dynamic today. But before jumping into that, because this is a dynamic that doesn't always come up, we talked about it and thought that it would be good to do a part one simply on that background and the impact that a betrayed partner who was undergoing actively sexual betrayal in a relationship now, how the game, I guess you could say, changes or shifts or deepens for somebody who has a background of sexual abuse and sexual betrayal stemming all the way back to childhood.
Yeah, I think it's hard or nearly impossible to understand where you are if you don't understand where you've been.
Yes.
And it's very important for her. You know, first of all, our hearts just go out to her. I mean, a 10-year-old girl,
yeah,
being absolutely betrayed, abused, perpetrated on. I mean, I have about 20 adjectives I could use to basically rail on this guy, whoever he is. I mean, it is just devastating. I had some experience like that as a kid as well from family members, and I have an idea of just how devastating this is. So we wanted to talk about that for her and anyone who's had this in their history, so that you can understand just how much impact it has today.
Yes.
Start to look for today's solutions. It's really important to understand where you've been. So we want to focus on that.
Well, and it has a tremendous impact. You're going to hear us mention the terminology complex trauma more than once today.
Complex trauma.
Right. By way of complex trauma, I guess I'll just give the quick intro to that term for those who aren't familiar with it from other podcasts we've done. There are two kinds of trauma kind of in the clinical world. There's simple trauma and complex trauma, if you break it down into really basic categories. And the difference between the two is thus. Simple trauma is when the brain identifies like a singular event or a rapid series of events that kind of it labels as a single occurrence, right? Where trauma on some deep level, in this case, betrayal, occurs. So it looks at that event or that circumstance and says, okay, this is something that happened. This is a huge period of time, but it is looked at through this lens of an isolated event. Complex trauma is where the brain stores traumatic memory, but with one key difference. It establishes a pattern, right, in the brain when it experiences, because trauma, as many of you probably know, is stored in a different, very visceral part of the brain. It's not uncommon. I mean, I myself, I can remember traumatic experiences from when I was a little kid. I can tell you the name of the people involved. I can tell you in some cases what they were wearing. Um, right now, as I think about it, I cannot remember what was lunch yesterday. I have no clue. I couldn't tell you what I ate.
Uh,
Right. So the brain stores these things for reasons that we talk about in other podcasts, but among other things, to try to keep us safe from future experiences. Well, when the brain identifies an experience that it goes through that says this hails back to something we went through previously, right? Depending on how that registers for the brain, which in a betrayal sense is very common. And here we have two critical links, right? Because you're not going to hear the specifics of the submission in the second half until next week. But suffice it to say, she is married to a partner, right? Who is engaged in sexual betrayal in this current relationship. And so we're dealing with a person who has a dynamic where, from the age of 10 at least onward,
yeah,
to some degree or another, her brain is recognizing, at least potentially speaking, and is coming to grips with the reality and all of the things that are implied with that of here is this tremendous time span here, and whatever links that her brain made, right, between that series of events, um, has really critical implications for the healing process, as well as for what is needed both on her part and on his part, for recovery to be successful. And
yeah,
it is on a different order in some respects than, not that there's ever a typical trauma recovery case, but your typical betrayal trauma case. Right.
yeah. Well, and it would be helpful, what you're describing, Steve. These events, the impact on her child brain cannot be overstated.
Absolutely.
There's a couple of things to be aware of here because this created a quote filter inside of her that all sexual issues and lots of other things are filtered through now her whole life.
Yeah.
One of the things to understand is that if we look at the development of the child brain, from the time a child is around age 4 or 5, they have the emotional part of their brain where emotional memory is stored, has the capacity to feel adult like emotions. It's that developed. The ability for the prefrontal cortex to interpret and put into context and understand what those emotional events mean, that doesn't happen until you're in your 20s.
Correct.
So here are these little kids experiencing adult emotions and trauma with no ability hardly at all to understand what they mean, the context of them, to separate themselves from it and realize this isn't me. I didn't do this. A lot of
Yes.
that is absent in the brain development. It doesn't come till much later. And the other thing in the research that's starting to show, there's many places that those traumatic, complex trauma memories are stored. One of them is a little place called the amygdala. They're finding now with traumatized children, their amygdala is enlarged in size.
Mm.
So imagine what happens when you take an emotional processing center that's already super powerful all by itself and you make it larger from your trauma. What's going to happen later when life is filtered through a larger amygdala? You're going to have bigger emotional experiences. Right? This is crazy stuff.
Yes.
And so here's where she finds herself today. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult set of circumstances. And, the submission that she sent doesn't encase as much information as would be probably ideal for examining this in terms of her specific case. So what we'll be doing today is going through and making some assumptions, not necessarily in her case, but just kind of giving you a general breakdown of what does this commonly cause,
Yeah.
right? For people who have been through this type of trauma and for victims in betrayal specifically, right? And what are the implications of that? What does it kick off in childhood, and how does that start to tie in with adulthood? when it comes to matters of sexuality, connection, attachment, all of those things. Okay.
Yeah, let's look at the general impact of sexual abuse on a child. You know, one of the first things, Steve, that you and I look at is this crazy distorted understanding of quote sexual norms, sexual values, sexual expectations. What role does sexuality play in my life? What does it look like?
Mhm.
What is it? What isn't it? That becomes horribly twisted and turned upside down in every which way.
Absolutely. I mean, just think about sex itself for a minute, what it
Mm.
even is, right? Again, and this is where it's, guys, it's very difficult to quantify. And we can't for sake of time here in this podcast, but just to touch on some of the significance, right? We are talking, I mean, picture in a child's brain who's experiencing having a sexual experience and not just for the first time, but in a distorted and and emotionally premature time.
Hmm.
Picture like somebody engraving into a plate these norms, these values, these expectations. Can those be changed over time down the road? Yes. What is the difficulty with that? The answer is it's progressively more difficult the earlier on this occurs.
Yes.
And so the wounds that are carried with this, again, we really can't, there's not a vocabulary to really describe how damaging or profound this is. But just to give you some examples, is sex spiritual experience? Is it a cheap experience? Is it just a physical thing? Is it a way that you love or don't love? And what does that even mean? Too often, tragically, you will hear stories and accounts of abuse victims, for example, being told by their abuser, this is how your dad loves you,
Yes.
or this is how your cousin loves you. Can
Mhm.
you imagine the impact that that has on a child, a statement like that? And
It's yeah, incalculable. You can't begin to quantify it,
the
right?
same thing happens with values and expectations, right?
Yeah.
Like what are put around this? How does one's own worth quantify with that? If an abuser, for example, is grading their quote unquote, and I use huge air quotes with that, performance or lack thereof, or whatever the case is, depending on what god awful set of circumstances accompanies these events, right? What does that actually, how does that translate? It creates all sort of distortions around what we just listed
Crazy
that have
to
to be
right.
sorted out.
You imagine receiving affirmation and twisted appreciation and attention and being told you're desirable or attractive solely based on your sexual performance as a child, and your whole worth gets attached to that. What happens now as you carry that forward? She's 10 years old. What happens when she reached puberty and
Yeah.
all of those sexual mechanisms inside her body actually became active? And then we're filtered through that previous experience or experiences.
Yeah.
I mean, just crazy to even try to calculate.
Well, and to continue on, right? So what it does, it impacts the self view, right? As a victim,
Huge.
oftentimes there is, again, I know, guys, we are sorry. This is not going to be a super fun podcast today, if you haven't already picked that up. And we're being serious with that. This is stuff that's good to cover, but it's a tough one today. For example, victim blaming. Think about what happens again when accounts in research or in law enforcement are shared, and when we discuss these in trainings as therapists and things. I mean, all sorts of distorted things are put out there. This is your fault,
Yes.
right?
You
This is your
deserve.
fault. Yeah, you deserve this.
Mhm.
Um, if you didn't look so pretty, or if you hadn't done this, then this wouldn't have happened. And
Mhm.
then what happens? The shift in responsibility of not just the event, but keeping secrets around the event
Yes.
is now shifted. You can't tell anybody. Guess what, 10-year-old brain? You get to shoulder this all on your own because that's what loyalty is.
Yes.
That's what loving your family member or your friend or whatever that person is supposed to be anyway.
Or if you tell these bad things will happen. And so now what
Yes.
connection is made with that? If I speak my voice, I am in danger.
Or my family's in danger
Hey,
or
my
any
family's
number of
gonna be
things that
right.
could happen.
Yeah. Yep. Look at how that works to having any voice going forward. How about this idea of consent versus compliance?
Yeah.
Well, you were involved with it, so you consented.
Yes, exactly.
Mm.
Right? Assigning responsibility that way. pleasure versus pain even.
Oh my
I mean, this
God.
can go this we won't go into detail with that one, but this can be come so royally again, there's just not vocabulary for how bad and how there's no other word for it, just evil this is, right?
There you go. We're
So there,
evil.
yeah, there you go. Worth
Yes.
and value, right? All of that. There,
Yeah.
along with this, and this probably is something that many of you would already assume, but there is an increased risk for sexual promiscuity in the future. Now that sexual distortion and promiscuity is the more popular version of this, but the other side of that is what we refer to as sexual anorexia, right? Or a hesitancy or even general, strongly attached aversion to sex of any kind.
Yes.
And think about that, understandably so. When the brain is registering what is supposed to be one of the most beautiful parts of life as something as being one of the most traumatic, of course it's going to end up that way, right? Or have the potential.
Well, another you mentioned this phrase, but see, there's this pleasure versus pain. A lot of the victims we've worked with over the years will often in great tears, even crying, will say, "There's a part of me that found that pleasurable, right? That found that to be, there was a part of me that, and I put this in quotes, liked it, and then another part that was horrified and betrayed and violated." And now they come forward today with those past memories, and they can't reconcile those opposing feelings. They feel incredible shame and incredibly broken and perverted for feeling, right, the pleasure and the pain at the same time. And you bring that into any kind of current sexual experiences, and the same confusion is pervasive.
Yeah.
Walk away in chaos.
Well, and very bizarre results, unfortunately, stem from this. You know, Patrick Carnes was one of the forerunners in studying the inverse relationship, for example, between sex and trust and intimacy that happens with abuse.
Mhm.
It's not uncommon for sexual abuse victims, for example, to be extremely promiscuous at the beginning of a relationship when it's more sexual or when it's more surface level. But because usually in a healthy relationship, what happens? As we become more emotionally intimate, we become more physically intimate. And there's a general progression there.
Right.
Oftentimes, abuse victims will exhibit an inverse relationship between the two. High degree of sex and sexuality at the beginning, but becoming progressively more averse as the relationship becomes quote unquote closer. I
Right.
mean, can you imagine the confusion that accompanies that relationship?
Such confusion. Right. Right.
Right.
And so if you take all that and you say, okay, let's take all of that, and what now happens with the impact with those who have been sexually abused as children? What happens in their adult intimate relationships? Hey everybody, PBSE podcast hosts Mark and Steve here with a special message about our revolutionary online recovery program for addict spouses and couples called Dare to Connect. Multiple times every week, we get messages from subscribers in the program. They're people just like you. They're trying to heal from the devastation of sex and porn addiction and betrayal trauma. And here's a few of our most recent submissions. Here's one from an addict in recovery. It says, D2C has principles that everyone should utilize regardless of their circumstances. It doesn't matter your coping mechanisms. It matters that you want to work towards genuine connection with your partner.
That's awesome. Another testimony from an addict continues on. My wife is just starting out in training as a licensed therapist. Dare to Connect has been far more useful to her than her degree.
Wow.
The way Mark and Steve apply what they've learned is always so redemptive. D2C has opened doors for my relationship that I thought would be shut forever. Mark and Steve are an incredible resource of information on the subject of sex addiction and betrayal trauma. We could not do this journey without their help.
Here's one from a partner who's been with us for nearly a year. I want you both to know that it is because of you guys and D2C that I'm able to be in the place that I am today. I will always be grateful to you both for your feedback and prompt replies to my questions. I can't even come close to putting it into words how valuable my time spent with y'all this past year has been to my life. Thank you for everything you taught me about betrayal trauma and boundaries and thinking errors and loving myself and making myself a priority and standing up for myself.
Love that. Love that submission. And then as we close out here today, guys, one more account from another addict in recovery. I wish I had a platform like this 14 years ago where I could have learned and done the hard work of recovery before I had done all this damage to myself and to my spouse. And to be candid with all of you, that's exactly why we created Dare to Connect. Mark and I found ourselves in that place. Messages like these and the others like them, they're what Dare to Connect really is all about, guys, and why Mark and I do what we do. Whether you're an addict or a partner of an addict, and no matter where you find yourself in the recovery process, Dare to Connect can take you to the next level. Don't wait another day to catapult your recovery forward. Today is your day for change. Visit us at daretoconnectnow.com to pick up your free 2-week trial of Dare to Connect today.
Right now in Dare to Connect, we're doing a really deep dive on what we call attachment styles, right? Anxious, I mean, the one that we're all moving toward, and if we're healthy, is what we call secure attachment style. That secure attachment style is blown to smithereens when these children are abused like this. So now we're looking at avoidant, anxious, and disorganized attachment styles.
Yeah.
And they are rampant in these individuals when they are adults.
They accompany children, like Mark said, almost without exception.
Without exception, right? Yep.
The world is a very unsafe place. Connection is very unsafe. All sorts of things have
I have a
occurred.
general sense of anxiety about everyone and everything. And when that kicks in, sometimes I'll go from there and just go to completely isolating and avoiding everything and everyone.
Self-worth and esteem are all over the board.
Gosh, it's just, yeah. And as adult, they sex itself becomes confusing. Right? They can feel this very bizarre, strange, strong connection during sex, and then find themselves drifting apart. Right? This rubber band effect that becomes so exaggerated. And anytime that there are violations or erosion of trust, which we're going to talk about in the second part of this, that this partner's experiencing, when that erosion of trust takes place, then the sexual side becomes even more distorted. It's crazy.
So, shame and secrecy around sex are also very common for people. This can be incredibly damaging and difficult, and I can attest to this personally, that the difficulties around, for so many who look to sex, for example, as the apex of a relationship. You imagine as a sexual abuse victim or the partner of one being robbed of that culmination by events that happened all this time ago. I mean, it's, again, tragic doesn't even cover it. But then overall, just trust issues in general, right? People become, generally speaking, very unsafe. There's a lens of skepticism, understandably so, through which a person views another person. When they ask for things or vocalize things, what's the automatic response in many cases? Why?
Yeah, they want something. There's an agenda.
What's your angle?
Yeah, what's your angle?
Why do you care?
Mm-hmm.
Caring to just to care is a very foreign concept for many abuse victims. Affection for the sake of affection there's something to be gained. Where's the catch?
Always suspect.
Yes.
Yeah. Then we have this concept, Steve, of traumatic repetition.
Boy. So many of you are familiar with the phrase, if you've been working in the betrayal world for some time or in the recovery world, there's a phrase, hurt people hurt people.
Yeah, or abused people abuse people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that can happen in all sorts of ways, ranging from the more mild to the very extreme. And we won't get into that. I think we've taken this to a sufficiently depressing place. But those who have been abused can oftentimes really struggle to form healthy attachments with their children, in a whole variety of ways.
I mean, she does mention, and we'll bring that up in our part two, that they have children. It has a great impact on, for example, how parents talk to their children or interact with their children with regard to the topic of sex.
Yes.
I was raised by a mother who was horrifically abused sexually as a child. And she brought of great awkwardness and shame and rigidity into her parenting style about all things sexual. And it played a significant role in how my arousal template was formed and early addiction. And she wasn't trying to do that. It's just she was trying to cope the best way she could from her abuse.
Yeah.
But we did not have healthy dialogue about things sexual.
So even though it's not intentional, what do we have here? In some ways, the impacts of that sexual abuse now being passed to yet another generation.
Generational. Yeah, absolutely generational, right?
Oh boy. Well, we again, I just feel the need to mid episode. We are sorry this is such a hard episode, but it's necessary information. We understand if you have to take a break from this episode and come back or
Yeah.
whatever you need to do. Well, let's talk about as we start to wrap up today's episode here. This does introduce, as we started, a unique dialogue of complex trauma. The brain is now recognizing potentially, again, to one degree or another, because there are all sorts of factors that influence how deep this runs and why and all of that. And we won't go into those today. We covered that in other podcasts. But to whatever depth it runs, we are now dealing with a partner and in turn the other partner and the relationship as a whole that is dealing with origins of trauma that is tragic as they are when they start with the relationship. They run much, much deeper than that.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things that we need to point out with this that's really we can't underestimate because and for you addicts who are listening, if you have a partner who has been through sexual abuse, or if you yourself have as well, this is vital information for you to understand. We talk about in other episodes where we talk about trauma, and one of the most devastating things about betrayal, specifically betrayal trauma, is when betrayal occurs in a relationship, depending on the depth, which obviously betrayal, sexual betrayal runs pretty high on the gamut for most. To whatever depth that betrayal runs for the person, the brain in its order of organization begins to question to some degree or another anything attached to anything with that depth of connection, not just in the relationship where the trauma occurred, but in many cases in other relationships as well. So betrayal victims frequently, simple, again, we're using air quotes here, but the clinical term, simple trauma victims where they have not endured betrayal trauma on a significant level, but then they encounter in a relationship will oftentimes not just question the sexual side of the relationship, right? When they find out about the sexual betrayal, what do they question? All of it,
All of it.
right? This whole relationship, which of this, what was real in this? They question their own sanity. I
Mhm.
sleep with this person. I'm physically intimate with this person. I've built a family with this person. And they kept this from me for 5, 10, 20, 40 years. What does that say about me and my capacity to see things,
Yeah.
to recognize things, right? There's a
Yeah.
whole undermining of not just the relationship and not just that one element, but also that own person's sense of self confidence or self worth. And as I said a minute ago, other relationships can also fall victim to that. If my own partner that I'm sexually intimate with could get this past me, well, what the hell else is everyone else doing?
Yes.
Right? Many partners describe feeling like they're almost living a twisted version of the Truman Show, right? Where there's that scene where Truman, played by Jim Carrey, he starts to look at everyone through a lens of, oh my gosh, everyone is pulling the wool over my eyes,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? There's a very real sense of experience that accompanies that for partners.
And one of
Ne-
the things that's
yeah, go
so
ahead.
hard with it is because we talked about how these are stored as powerful emotional memories deep in that limbic system. You never know what kind of event, something someone says, a way someone looks, a scenario. You don't know what's going to trigger you.
Yeah.
And you'll have betrayed partners who've had, a sexual abuse history where they're like, I never know when it's going to hit me. This can be anywhere at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And then life itself becomes scary and anxious because you're hyper vigilant on high alert all the time, waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Very, very tragic. So that's, and now as catastrophic as that is, right? That is the simple trauma model. Now
Yes.
let's take that and let's extend it out to the complex trauma model.
Ah,
So everything that we just talked about is still in effect, but now what has happened, depending on again what level of link the brain is making with what's going on in the adult relationship now versus what's happened in either prior intimate relationships, if this has been a long pattern, or with the child abuse, right? Depending on what links that the brain makes there, it isn't just an undermining of the relationship today or the other relationships that person's having. What now is at risk of being undermined? One's whole lifespan, everything.
everything.
Who? No, it isn't just my husband isn't worthy of trust. Men aren't worthy of trust.
Hmm.
It isn't just my wife hurt me or harm me in this way. Women are pigs, and I will never get close to one ever again.
Yeah, it becomes this global generalization, this thing that just overarches every part of your life experience.
It can also have reverberations back to prior relationships. Mark and I were talking about examples. For example, if there was child abuse with a relationship previously, and let's say that the abuser, say it was a father with a daughter. Let's say that the father did a ton of work, legally and otherwise, to try to work that out, to heal that relationship. Well, now 20 years, let's fast forward 10, 20, 30 years, where a lot of that has been resolved or healed. She enters in a relationship and now is sexually betrayed by her partner. Guess what happens at the next family dinner? That relationship that had healed and was was on a path of a positive trajectory. What's just happened? All that progress could potentially be erased and then some.
Yeah, it's
So
true.
you can see, I mean, this is like a nuclear weapon going off emotionally in one's world when this happens.
Well, and
Okay.
let's talk about, so why would we spend all the time to talk about,
I'm
right?
talking about the super positive stuff, right?
To depress you, to make you feel entirely hopeless. And it's the reason that we're sharing all this. We want those of you who have experienced sexual abuse in your past. I kind of refer to it as removing the mystery. Right? This can be like, the Wizard of Oz movie where the giant Oz, thing is, I am the powerful Oz, right? It's this big, and Dorothy's there and their knees are shaking. Where what's really going on? It's this little old dude behind the curtain over there pulling levers and pushing buttons. This can become overwhelming and literally take on a monstrous, you know, um, identity. And starting to break it down and peel back the layers starts to allow us to see, hey, you know what? Yes, this is horribly painful. It hurts. It's scary. But I'm starting to understand where this comes from, how it works, right? How it impacts me, what it did to my child brain. I'm removing the mystery of all of this so that I can be more informed and more intelligent and more wise to start working on it.
Yes.
And that's why we're going into all this, and not if you're a betrayed partner, for example, who experienced this. What if you're an addict who's trying to be in recovery, who's with a betrayed partner that has experienced this?
It's critical to
We're
understand
we're
that.
saying all this for you addicts to go, oh my gosh, now I'm starting to understand the impact that my betrayal had on my partner based on her history.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. I'm going to take this serious.
Yes.
There's
Well,
way more going on than I ever imagined.
as bad as I thought it was before, there's more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, on the back of that, we would lovingly invite you to maybe go watch an episode or two of Care Bears. That could be helpful. In all seriousness, though, maybe go cleanse your palate. We know that that was a difficult episode.
Yeah.
We love and appreciate all of you who attend the podcast every week. As always, guys, if you love the podcast, even the hard episodes, you will love Dare to Connect. This is the kind of raw and realness and then some that you get in D2C on a every episode that comes throughout the week, all four or, well, no, 5 episodes throughout the week. We hope that you'll come join us for a 2-week free trial of that. You can go to daretoconnectnow.com and grab a 2-week trial of that. Come see what it's all about and see if it's right for you and or your coupleship. And for all those who, if you would like to send in a question to the podcast, again, there is a time delay as always with getting those answered versus joining the program, but joining the DC program. But you can go to that same website, daretoconnectnow.com. There's a PBSC logo stripe up at the top of there. You can click on that, and there's a contact form on that page where you can send questions into us.
Yeah. Well, thanks for toughing it through with us on this
Yes.
episode. We're going to move into next week. We're going to move into part 2, and we're going to talk about solutions and how do you move through and come out of this in a healthy space, in a connected space. We're going to hit all that in next week's episode.
Absolutely. Be safe, be well, guys. We will see you then.
Everything expressed on the PBSC podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.